Lloyd Vance does a great job covering the NFL, also Professional Writer Association America writer, correspondent for the NFL Network, kind enough to join us on a Wednesday on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. How you been, Lloyd?
Doing good, Q. Always glad to talk to you, man.
You too, pal. Good to catch up. All right, let's get to some of these rule changes here. I was just talking about it right now. This new rule that they're instituting, which I think is really we haven't seen anything like this. A 50-yard penalty, possible ejection for lowering head to make the hit. It's still open to definition and open to interpretation, because I guess the one thing I'm thinking is, would this apply now? Say a quarterback's going in for a quarterback sneak, and what does a quarterback typically do? They lower their head. So I just think this now, I don't know. I think you're opening up a can of worms right here. And how are you going to allocate possible disqualification of some of these players?
Yeah, it's crazy. They cleaned up the catch rule to kind of get that off our plate, but now they throw this in front of us with this strike zone and guys lowering their head. And as you're saying, you can call helmet-to-helmet contact almost on every play. Now they're including all the players on the field. You know, let's talk about in between the tackles, the offensive linemen. They're hitting heads almost every single play, and the quarterbacks, as you're saying, and running backs are pretty much taught to make themselves a smaller target when it's coming time to get tackled, and they're supposed to deliver the blow. So it's going to be interesting to see if they actually do call this a lot more on offensive players. We know that defensive guys have been hollering about it for years, and it's always in a bang-bang situation. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this is legislated, but I think the games are going to get a little bit longer due to this.
Well, yeah, because think about it. If it's applying to tacklers and ball carriers, again, if you're running a wildcat or halfback option or a quarterback keeper, then you're essentially, once you break the pocket, you're considered a ball carrier. So once that quarterback lowers his helmet, now what happens then? You're going to eject the quarterback?
Yeah, I can't wait to see when Tom Brady, he's famous for doing all those sneaks and putting his head right out front when they call him for it. I just don't see it's going to happen. And we may be talking about this next year, about them getting rid of this rule.
Possibly. I mean, they never stick with anything. You had those comments by Jay Gruden coming out today. Without a doubt, the Washington Redskins, are better at the quarterback position. That's kind of an unveiled shot there at Kirk Cousins. I mean, he never got that long-term deal, so he was left to go sign with Minnesota on that fully guaranteed 3-year contract as a free agent. But I'm telling you, I still think, to me, it's a wash. But that's kind of an unwarranted, unnecessary shot there by Jay Gruden.
It totally is, and he didn't try to veil it in any way. They've always kind of thought Kirk Cousins was an afterthought type of guy. They drafted him after RG3 in that draft so many years ago, and then he just never seemed to be their frontline guy, even when he was throwing for over 4,500 yards a season, driving the football down the field, leading them to the playoffs. And they did not want to give him that long-term commitment, and then they finally let him walk, and they make the big trade for Alex Smith, who's a steady guy, a true professional, and they're glad he's going to come in there, and he's not going to squabble about his contract or which plays they're calling or anything like that. So they're happy with Smith, and we'll just see how Cousins does with the Vikings.
Now, let's stick with the NFC East for a second. I don't know. I think there are a ton of holes in this Bennett story, to be honest with you. And I know he turned himself in after allegedly injuring an elderly woman, I guess a paraplegic, a security guard. First of all, is the NFL going to look into this from this standpoint? If the Seattle Seahawks knew of this incident, why would it take a year for this now all of a sudden to come to the forefront here with this with Texas issuing a warrant for his arrest?
Yeah, this could get into the personal conduct situation within the NFL. Obviously, they're going to take their time in terms of putting a case together. They have their own investigators, but I think in the end, Michael Bennett is very high profile in terms of being outspoken against law enforcement and other social issues. So that may factor into this situation, but they do need to piece this together. But obviously it's serious enough that they have issued a warrant, and it's good that he turned himself in, and he's going to work out within the process of trying to prove himself innocent.
Yeah, I mean, despite witnessing the alleged assault, I guess one of the police officers at the scene didn't make the arrest and allowed him on the field. I guess the major hole here is there's no video evidence. You know, you got dozens of cameras, TV surveillance, not to mention tens of thousands of camera phones in the stadium, and there's no evidence at all. Even with all that, I mean, you know, we saw what happened with Elliott and the Brady case and the way the NFL is. I mean, they're always looking to pinch a player. And I don't know if you look at Bennett's track record from before what happened with the cops, or you take that out of the equation. I mean, is there going to be enough down the road where the commissioner comes down and says, look, you know, we're going to hand you down a 4-game suspension?
Yeah, he could. You know, it's always at his discretion, and that's something they gave up years ago in the CBA. And, you know, when you go to court, they're always going to lean on that Brady ruling, or even now the Ezekiel Elliott, because the commissioner has that levity to be able to do what he wants to do in these types of situations. You know, in the end, I think Michael Bennett will lawyer up, and he's going to hire a high-priced guy to kind of prove these charges wrong. Maybe it'll end up in some type of civil situation where they get a settlement. So we just got to see how this thing's going to play out. The Eagles are standing by him. They said they're going to wait for the legal process to play itself out.
Yeah, which they should in this case, because, again, there's too many holes in the story. All right, what's going here with the Giants? And, you know, I don't know if this is a troll job by one of their former players and Carl Banks on Twitter, but basically coming out and tweeting that, according to his sources, and I think this might be a troll job against some of the other beat writers, that a team offered New York their next 3 years of first-round draft picks, a second, a third this year for Beckham, and they have until 4 p.m. Thursday to make that deal. I don't know what to think of it, but if there's any validity in that, I'm picking up the phone. I'm doing that right now. I'm pulling the trigger. I'm driving him to the airport. I'm getting rid of him, and I'm taking that. It sounds like that is a king's ransom for him, but you get all these conflicting reports with what Shermer's saying, what's Gettleman saying. I mean, when it's all said and done, do you think the Giants are going to turn around and trade Beckham?
They possibly could if it's enough. Depends on the Mara family if they want to continue dealing with Odell Beckham. Obviously, a once-in-a-generation type receiver, a guy with big-time playmaking skills. So they're going to give him every opportunity to kind of atone for himself and some of the things he's done, including on the field or off the field. But I think in the end, that's like you said, a king's ransom. That's just too much for a team to turn down. That sounds like even more than what was traded for some of the high-profile quarterbacks that were traded in the past. So I think it's kind of hearsay, and I'd like to hear his sources on that one.
Yeah, well, that's why they call them sources, right? We never give them up, so we don't know. I think it might have been a troll job. Lloyd Vance joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. I don't know if you read this story with Zimmer talking about Teddy Bridgewater and that left knee. And you never want to speculate, but I know, and it's funny too, because I've known players that have dealt with this before where they couldn't pass a physical. A team released them. They're getting ready to sign with another team. Their original team didn't pass them, but yet the other team passed them. And Zimmer was talking to some reporters in Orlando. They were talking about the health of Bridgewater, and he just said, listen, you know, the medical people, the reports I got weren't as positive as I was about it. And I guess that's one of the reasons why they just decided, okay, Teddy, you know, you're going to be free to sign elsewhere. If you're a Jet fan, is there a little bit cause for concern here?
Well, I think they brought him in on 1-year contract to make good, and they're just going to see what he has. Todd Bowles has already come out and said that McCown's going to start the season as the starter, and Bridgewater is just trying to piece his career back together. And we know, as you were saying, knees are kind of, one doctor may look at it one way and another doctor may see another thing. So, you know, I think in the end, maybe he'll get his chance with the Jets. Right now, he looks like he's going to be the backup, but I think he's definitely ahead of Petty and Hackenberg.
Now, and the reason I bring it up, what happens now if McCown goes down or struggles and the Jets have to turn to Bridgewater so the season's not lost? It's almost on the back of your mind, you're reverting back to these comments where, well, wait a second, maybe we have a player, albeit it's only a 1-year contract, a couple $100,000, not a problem, $500,000 in guaranteed money, even though that total contract has value close to $15 million. Now all of a sudden, you know, we've got some damaged goods here. Yeah,
I think in the end they're just going to try to see what Teddy can do, and if he gets out there, let's not forget he was a first-round talent. He had a pretty good career going early on with the Vikings before he got hurt. So this is a chance for them to bring him in, take a look. But I firmly believe that they're going to get one of these young quarterbacks in the draft and bring him in there and kind of just see how it shakes out with those three quarterbacks.
All right, we'll close it with the Eagles, and no surprise here, Doug Peterson basically came out and said, for all intents and purposes, Nick Foles is going to be on the roster. It's safe to say he's going to be with Philadelphia to start the 2018 season. I don't think that's any type of negative indictment on Carson Wentz's recovery time. I don't. I just never believed that they were going to trade Nick Foles. I just never thought they would. I think they have the best case scenario here just in case Carson Wentz isn't fully healthy when the season begins.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was going to take some kind of huge offer, maybe a couple number ones, or Howie Roseman has to be totally blown away with the offer and then take it. But I think the Eagles are going to take their time with it. They've talked to their medical personnel, and they know that Wentz is going to take a little while to get back here going into training camp. And why not put the Super Bowl MVP out there? And he's had a great contract at $7 million this year.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, think about it. When you look at, I think the best thing that Doug said is, listen, I need to speak to Carson and talk a little bit about extending his career, right? Just stressing the importance of living the fight, another down, longevity, and staying healthy. I'm wondering if that's also another way of saying, listen, you've got to scale back a little bit your style of play. But then again, his style of play is also what makes him a great quarterback.
Yeah, and he's definitely young, and he's going to learn when they get down on the ground. We saw John Elway, who was a great athlete, could move around early in his career, learn how to slide, learn how to get out of bounds and not take that big hit, but still have that as part of the game to extend play. So I think that still be Carson Wentz going into his career. And you know, I think they're just going to lean on Foles right now and just lean on his leadership and say, okay, you're our guy for right now. But Foles, being the humble guy that he is, he's going to step to the background when needed, when Wentz is ready.
I agree with that. All right, a couple weeks away from the NFL draft. The NFL never stops. Always appreciate you jumping on again. Lloyd Vance on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline. Good stuff as always, pal. We'll talk next week. Appreciate it.
All right, Q.
All right, you got to be well. Lloyd Vance, again, good follow on Twitter at Lloyd Vance.